Hey guys, this is Snap. Today we're going to be going over all of the changes to all of the builds now that we have all of the passive tree and passive masteries. There are a few changes, some big new tech, some small nerfs around the passive trees, so let's get right into it. First things first is the Spark Assassin here. The tree should look pretty similar here, although we are taking a few of the masteries. The core of the tree is just taking the 2 large cluster jewel sockets and then taking the 4 mediums with aerodynamic streamline. Very, very strong on a Spark build. A few noteworthy things on the tree here is that they actually moved the intensity over to the caster mastery, and so if you're using pinpoint support, you're going to need to get the intensity somewhere. I think that the nimbleness cluster here is the best spot to get it. Just gives you some multi. It's pretty good pathing out of the shadow tree, so I think this is the best spot to get it. You do also still need to socket in the 1 hazardous reach, so this is probably a pretty good spot to do it over here in shadow. Ghost Dance is a super good defensive layer while you're in the core of the party because you get a bunch of evasion. Whenever you take a big hit, you'll recover your ES as your evasion. And now the downside here is that you cannot recover energy shield to above evasion rating. So you might see here that our evasion rating is at 1000. That 1000 evasion rating might concern you. However, we do have a Watcher's Eye over here, which is 24 ES gain on hit. This actually bypasses the downside. And if you're using Spark, a skill that hits a fuck ton, you're basically going to be full ES all the time. You don't necessarily need to worry about the recharge or the regen. And if you are in range of all the aura bots, obviously your evasion rating is going to be sky high, so it doesn't really matter. Also, this evasion and energy shield mastery, the +1 ES per 8 evasion on boots is kind of nuts. It has a lot of synergy with stuff like Syntrek. Also, the Voidwalker boots we have on here is around 500 evasion, so it's an extra like 40 flat ES just for 1 point. Super strong. Soul Thief is also a little bit nerfed because it doesn't give you the leech, but you could easily take an ES leech point here, so that caps out your ES leech. The 2 other masteries to note here is the stun threshold based on your ES. This is super nice for stun immunity. You don't just randomly get stunned. The crit mastery is just effective non-damaging ailments. This will scale your Scorch and Brittle from your Secrets of Suffering, so that's super, super nice. This Disciple of the Forbidden cluster up at the top is super powerful, 3% increased damage per endurance, frenzy, or power charge. And since this is a badge of the Brotherhood build, you're going to have tons of these. It's actually a ton of ink damage. And the last notable thing on the tree here is actually going to be this Elemental Mastery off here to the left. While you can Thread of Hope the Divine Judgment here, we actually want to path out here to the Elemental Mastery. The reason for that is if you take this 60% reduced elemental damage taken, or reflected elemental damage taken, and you pair this with a Pantheon, you can actually get Ellie Reflect Immune. And because you're using Spark, you can run any Reflect map and not care about taking any reflected damage. Other than that, the gearing should look pretty similar to what it was before. I don't think anything here has changed. What we are going to try to do is try and get one of these items here, Scourge, with the Keystone Versatile Combatant. That way we can link somebody with a bunch of block chance and convert that block to spell block, and that's going to be super strong for the carry. But I don't imagine this character dying. It is quite tanky. It is the 4k ES with the Incandescent Heart, which is converting 25% of Ellie to Chaos. It's got a ton of ES on hit. Like, this is just a super, super tanky build. I'm more concerned about the Culler's survivability, so this build should be super fine. Moving on to the Tauntbot tree here. There are a lot of changes here. I want to thank S-Mans on Twitch for sending me this alternate pathing here for the champion. I think this works out to be a lot better, actually. So instead of pathing over to the right side here and going up, you actually want to path over here and then grab Champion of the Cause. And what you can do is anoint Charisma. Because there's no aura effect over here, you just anoint Charisma. It is 2 golden oils, so that's a little bit of an oof. But I think the build is a lot better here. You actually pick up an additional 6 aura effect here that you didn't have before, and that means that your Legion Jewel needs to be less good. And so I think that's super, super important. It means that you need 21% on your Legion Jewel here to hit 89, and that's a much lower bar than the 27 that you needed before. So definitely I would recommend this pathing as well. If you do get a better Legion Jewel, you can actually take out the Conqueror's Potency here and put something else in, like a Cobalt, and you're also converting some of the life here along the way using an energy from within. I'm not so sure about this. There might be some other stuff you could put points into here, but I think this is just a really quick way to get a little bit of ES on the tree. There might be something better to do with these points. I haven't quite looked into it yet. Other than that, the tree should look pretty similar here. You do take the larges with the Riot Queller as well, some ES smalls. You can fit in Riot Quellers here on the smalls if you don't care about your personal ES and you just want a little bit more damage. I think the damage is less of a problem. I think people are going to want to be pushing out as much defenses as they can, especially in the Scourge League, there's going to be a lot of damage you guys are going to be taking, so I would prioritize the defenses over the offenses here, although Riot Quellers on the smalls are an option just to keep in mind. This new Legion jewel here actually does not convert glancing blows, so I think this is super, super nice if you're going to be linking somebody with Protective Link. It means you can take this Legion jewel, grab all the notables, and then hopefully grab glancing blows just for a few extra points here. It means you don't have to path over to the Witch Jewel socket. You don't really care about any of these notables over here anyways, so this is super, super nice. You do, however, need to take one cluster jewel here, a small cluster jewel with efficiency. It is 6% per small notable plus a 50% big notable here. These jewels are not in POB yet, so I just simulated it here. Just know that you're going to have to spend 3 extra passive points here to pick up this particular jewel, but the stats here should be correct. With this small jewel here, you'll be able to fit in Malevolence, which is super nice for the spark carry, so if you can squeeze this in, great. I think it's worth dropping one of the smalls just to fit in this aura. As for the masteries here, these are pretty much a no-brainer. You get mana reservation efficiency, you get discipline and reservation efficiency. I don't think it's worth taking any of the other reservation masteries because this is just AoE and duration, which you don't necessarily care about, and it's really bad because this build is super strapped for points. The last mastery you really want to take here is up by Ghost Dance. It's the Evasion Energy Shield Mastery. You get 1 flat ES per 8 evasion on boots. This makes Sintrek like a pair of like 210 ES boots. These is really crazy on Sintrek. I think it's going to make Sintrek like one of the hardest boots to beat in terms of like raw ES. If you can just take this one passive point here, it's super, super strong on something like Sintrek. Like these boots give you so many stats, so much ES, so much evasion, so I think this is super, super hard to beat with the mastery. The gearing here is identical, nothing's really changed here. Just know that the pathing here on the champion has changed a little bit, so you're gonna go around the left side, grab Champion of the Cause. One other thing you can do here is you can actually put a Thread of Hope here on this jewel socket. This medium Thread of Hope here lets you allocate Prismatic Skin, so if you're at 89 over cap, you can just grab this, and that's strictly only if you don't need the aura effect here for 89. So if you get to 89, you can Thread of Hope this and then grab the +2 max res if you'd like. This is a decent thing. Just know that it is a little bit of minus res, so you can weigh that against whether or not you want to socket it in here. Now, the Cursebot has had a few changes since the last video here. One of the main things to know here is that a lot of the generic curse effect on the tree got just kind of deleted. So the small cluster jewels here that give you flammability or whatever curse effect is going to be a lot more important. So we opted to go for larges into smalls instead. I think this is going to be the most point efficient thing you can do. I think eventually when your build is getting a lot better, you're getting better gear, that voices with smalls are going to be the best thing to socket in here, but I think early on just any 8 passive large with the smalls here is going to be the easiest thing to set up, like cheapest thing to do, so I'd definitely go that route. The pathing here should look pretty similar as to what previous Cursebots looked like. The masteries here to note are going to be the AoE of aura skills. This does affect your blasphemy and your auras that are on blasphemy, so this is kind of a nice thing to take on the curses, just gives you more coverage of the defensive curses. And then obviously the 15 ink mana reservation efficiency of skills, this is a no-brainer. Also disc reservation efficiency, also a no-brainer. And then the only other mastery you're taking here is the hinder on curse, so it's just 15% hinder. You don't really have a great source of hinder otherwise, but this will slow down the enemies, and since you lost a lot of generic curse effect, you're not actually hitting the temp chains cap anymore, so the reduced movement speed here is actually kind of helpful. And then the last one here actually I missed is just 30% increased reservation efficiency of curse skills, also a no-brainer. But yeah, this tree is super cookie cutter. The thing to note here also, same as the other build, is that these cluster jewels are not in POB yet, so just know that you have to allocate 2 extra passive points here per Cobalt Jewel, so that's why this build is at 112 out of 123. So this is actually a level 97 character. Just know that you need to allocate 2 points here. Don't forget about that. One thing to note here in the gem links is that the Cursebot actually got so much additional reservation efficiency that it didn't have before. They can actually start jamming enhances on your curses here to give it extra effectiveness. So in the body armor, you can actually get a 5 link here with your 4 curses and the enhance here, so that's super nice. And then also in your blasphemy setup in the helmet, you can link in enhance here as well. This build is also running its own purity of elements and discipline. The purity of elements is still 35 in POB, but it still should fit here. You still have 15% unreserved mana, you still have a ton, so this should definitely fit even though it's still 35 in POB. Obviously its own discipline just for a little bit of personal tankiness. There couple other big changes to the gearing here. We've actually relegated Kingmaker to the Cursebot. We think that this is the best slot to have it on. It's actually one of the more tanky members with the Kingmaker on at 8k, so that's super nice. One of the other big changes here is we've actually put the Eye of Malice on the Cursebot. If you don't know what this does, if you get a bunch of negative fire or cold res on the enemy, it actually will multiply that negative cold res by 1.5. We're actually getting a fuck ton of negative fire res through flammability, and then we are also using exposure, and then also Scourge is an insane ailment that will lower the fire res in the mob a ton, and then all of that negative res gets multiplied by 1.5. So this is a huge DPS increase. Not to mention it has a bit of ES, it's got some evasion, fire cold res, super solid unique for damage, everything. It's just really no-brainer on the Cursebot here, or at least somebody on the party. But yeah, the rest of the gear is just like some ES rares, try and get res capped. This should be a no-brainer for the rest of these. Alright, let's move on to the Mana Guardian. Now there's some big changes here that we need to go over. Now the concept is still the same, right? You get a bunch of mana on the Mana Guardian, reserve it all, you give a bunch of ES. There are a few big nerfs here, hidden nerfs in the passive tree. This jewel socket here with Healthy Mind got a big nerf because the Heart and Soul clusters are no longer in range. So there actually is a better spot now on the Guardian. It's actually to move it over to the Scion Life Wheel. You can use a Healthy Mind here and convert all of this to mana. Know that this pathing is for no split personality, but there is an alternate pathing you can do if you want to use a split personality. If you want to use a split personality with int and mana, what you can do is connect the tree from this side over here, and then once you're done connecting that side, you can disconnect this side and then put a split personality in any of these accessible jewel sockets over here. Now, this character is planning on using Protective Link on one of the squishier targets, so Glancing Blows is a no-brainer here. It also caps out your block, gives you a substantial amount of spell block, and then because you are using an Aegis Aurora, getting the ES on block is super nice on this build. Not to mention transferring all of that block to somebody else with no downside. Now, the big thing to go over here on this build is the masteries. So obviously you take the reservation efficiency, that's a no-brainer. 3% of mana is extra ES. This is just simply moved from the Arcane Will cluster. This used to be here, you used to get it for free. Now it's just on a mastery. I don't know why they do this. Insightfulness is a really big cluster, so this is the best spot to take that. Now, one of the craziest things on the Mana Guardian that was introduced was actually this cluster here, the Lightning Mastery. And now you might be wondering why you're doing this. So they added a note on the Lightning Mastery that is increases and reductions to maximum mana also apply to shock effect at 30% of their value. Now, this came out of left field. This is insane on the Mana Guardian. So basically, if you don't know what this means, is it means you can get shock capped on the Mana Guardian relatively with zero investment. You know, we used to build full characters that were geared towards shocking the enemies with 50% effectiveness because it's such a huge multiplier to your damage. But now for 4 points, you just get capped on a Mana Guardian. This is just absolutely nuts. So the way the math works out on this particular build, so just remember the 30% here. As you can see here, we have 630% increased mana. Some quick maths here. You get a 7.3 increase multiplier, and then you multiply that by 0.03, so you get a 2.19 multiplier. You're actually getting 20% here on this node, plus 30% increased effect of lightning ailments, so that's another 0.5 multiplier. This brings us up to a 2.69 multiplier. Additionally, the Unbound Ailments support has 54% increased effect of non-damaging ailments. This is a 3.23 multiplier, and the way we're going to be triggering the shock is Vol Lightning Trap. It also has a 15% minimum shock. You multiply the base 15 shock by the multiplier, which is 3.23, and that is a 48.4% shock, which is almost near the cap. And this is literally just for 4 points on the Mana Guardian, and that's it. So while we had entire characters dedicated before to just getting 50% shock, now all you need is 4 points on a Mana Guardian. Boom, you're instantly done. Other than this pathing changes here and the shock nodes, the Mana Guardian is pretty much identical. You did lose a little bit of mana on the tree, so you're going to be sitting at 18.2 because you're using 4 points for shock nodes here instead of like 20k. But the gearing should be the same here, and then don't forget about the Lightning Trap. It's just a Vol Lightning Trap with Unbound Ailments, and then all you have to do is throw the Vol Lightning Trap on top of the boss, and then you're good to go to get a 50% shock. Unfortunately, you cannot use Skitterbots here. Skitterbots is a minion, and any minions do not get your Lightning Ailment effect, so make sure that you're using some other source of shock that's not Skitterbots. But yeah, Mana Guardian, pretty nuts, got a really big buff. All right, now that we got the new tree, we can actually move on to the Scion Aura bot. This pathing for an Aura bot should look pretty reminiscent of what it was pre-Delirium, just with some extra mastery shit intertwined here. You basically path to all the Aura effect stuff, intuitive leap over to the Charisma cluster, grab the Influence, you grab Sovereignty. The masteries, you'd want to take the AoE and the duration here because you are going to be casting a lot of Vol skills. Additionally, this duration mastery is super nice. This is more skill effect duration instead of increase, so this is actually multiplying all the increased duration you have as well. Down here, I'm undecided on whether or not I want to do this intuitive leap here for the extra duration. If I feel like I want it, good quality of life, I'll take it, but if I really need to eke out all the stats in Scourge, then I'll probably end up unspecking this. So the other masteries here to note would be the Grace on the Evasion Mastery. For 3 points here, you can grab Grace, has 25% mana reservation efficiency, so that's big. Pathing over here to Anointed Flesh gives you Corrupted Blood immunity. If you're smiting stuff, you're going to need Corrupted Blood immunity. This is a pretty easy way to get it. On top of the +1 max res, if everybody's sitting at 89 overcap, you get the Energy Shield Mastery for the stun threshold, which means you no longer need a presence, and being stun immune is super big quality of life. This Arcane Guarding cluster is actually a ton of ES and some extra block. You get some spell block as well. This is something to consider instead of just grabbing 6% ES nodes. The last thing is the Discipline mana reservation efficiency here. Unfortunately, since you're using March of the Legion, you're no longer able to equip Syntrex, so you cannot take this Evasion and ES Mastery over here. Ghost Dance for the basically one-shot immunity. This is super nice. You can extra like 1k EHP pool off of the first 3 hits that you're taking. So this is something to take. You have a ton of evasion. It gives you like a 1k recovery here. Just know that the evasion values here are way lower than it is in game right now, just because Grace has not been changed to give you more evasion. So this should be buffed in live. You are taking 2 cluster jewels here. These are just smalls with 3 pointers, so you get 12 efficiency and the 50% notable. There's 2 of them here, so these aren't in the game. I'm just representing them with a cobalt jewel. And just to spend the extra points, I've just pathed like 6 points here just to make sure I'm like calculating the correct number of points. So the gearing of this character is the exact same. Sign of the Senior for the level 30 smite, Waka Watuki Omatua for the aura effect. Now you're gonna try and get an Alpha's Howl, and the corruption's actually better than the enchant. But what you can do is corrupt it first and then enchant it with a new vial. So that's something you can look into doing. If you don't have an enchant on, or sorry, a corruption on the Alpha's Howl, you can just simply drop Defiance Banner or drop down the level of your clarity here. You should be able to fit everything in still. Some rares, you get the aura effect on the chest, as we spoke before in the last video, and then some ES on the rings and the gloves. Other than that, there is no substantial changes to this build. Just the pathing has changed a little bit, and then with the extra efficiency that we got, we can actually fit in the Defiance Banner for the extra armor and evasion, and then also the clarity. Also, you're able to fit in your own discipline as well. Last but not least, let's move on to the Culler here. There isn't a ton to talk about regarding the Culler. The build should be pretty straightforward. I have a full-fledged video on how to build the Culler, and just like the basics of the tree. If you want to go check that out, I'll link it in the annotations of the video. But basically, you get all the uniques. There's no really replacements here. You're just gonna have to equip all this gear. So the only thing here to talk about is going to be the tree. Now, this tree's goal was to get 100% spell suppression chance, which we're able to do by pathing here. Got a respectable 4k life. Now, this version of the tree has 4k life, but also 2 discerning taste notables. And this is reserving your anointment slot to reserve the other discerning taste. There is another variant of this build that gets an additional 1k life. However, it does not anoint 2 discerning taste. So you're basically trading out 40 rarity for 1k life. Now, the alternate pathing on the Culler here is going to be, if you want to just grab 1 discerning taste here, you're just pathing to one of them and saving your anoint. What you do is you path over to Marauder and grab all the max res and the life here in Marauder. And then what you do is you anoint the flask effect over here on natural remedies, and this saves you a lot of points as well. So it's a bit of a trade-off. You can get up to 4.8k life here. Just know that you are losing 40 rarity for it. So if you feel like the Culler could use the extra 1k life, and it's dying a little bit less in the maps, then, you know, doing this trade-off for the extra 1k life for 40 rarity isn't the worst thing in the world. So you can kind of decide which route you want to go. I'll link both of the versions of the POBs because one's a little bit more tankier than the other. You can choose which one you guys want to play. But yeah, this build is super straightforward. You just grab Flask Effect, you grab life, you grab spell suppression. Some of the good masteries here is the movement speed if you haven't taken damage recently. You are unfortunately not able to fit in a Quicksilver Flask, or at least I don't think you should. I think Amethyst Gold is definitely the way to go here. And since you are wearing a Greed's Embrace, your movement speed is actually kind of fucked. So getting some extra movement speed here on the Evasion Mastery, and then also taking Quick Step for an extra 6% movement speed, kind of nice. Other than that, you are taking some extra life on the Life Mastery. You get 50% reduced crit from spells, which is super nice. And since you have 100% spell suppression chance, any spell that is critting is automatically getting minus 50% damage on it. So that's super, super nice. This should reduce a lot of the one-shots that this build build was encountering before. This life mastery does have a downside, which is the reduced life recovery rate. We don't really care about this since he has a lot of life gain on hit from Feast of Flesh. So getting this life mastery for the 10% increased life pool is super nice. You don't really care about the downside here. And then up here, basically, you're just grabbing the Giga Chaos Res cluster, getting more Chaos Res and Ellie Res here. So this build is pretty straightforward. You just grab a fuck ton of life. You grab the flask effect that does exist on the tree. The gearing is pretty much set in stone. There isn't a ton of wiggle room to change this build up, unfortunately. But yeah, that should sum up all of the updates to the 6-man party comp. The next question we need to address is, what do you play in a 2, 3, 4, or 5-man? So I'm going to try and address this question a little bit more in depth because this is probably the most common question I get asked. Now, as I said in my last video, any party comp you're going to make is going to revolve around using Nebulous on the Spark Assassin here. Nebulous is the highest damage you can push out on a carry build right now, and then forming your party around getting the 90 overcap and the supporting auras is what you're going to want to aim around. So the first changes you're going to make to the carry are is he's going to want to run his own auras. The best way to do that is to first turn off all of the stuff he was reserving before. And then after you've turned off everything, you're going to make an aura link here. Ideally, it is Zealotry, Hatred, Wrath, and then an Enlighten. And this actually fits if you take this 5-point cluster here. All you need to do is grab this aura reservation stuff. It's 8 efficiency, and then you get 12 efficiency from Sovereignty and an additional 15. This cluster is nuts for 5 points. I just foresee everybody taking them. Now, you're going to need to get some of these points back. I think the easiest thing to take off is unfortunately the Ellie Reflect immunity. You take this off, you'll have enough points. This just means simply that you're going to need to watch out for Ellie Reflect maps now. So you're not necessarily going to get that quality of life that 6-mans do. But with just these changes, you still have plenty of mana to cast your Spark if you have a mana flask here, and then also you're at the same number of points as you were before. And you're running all your own DPS auras. Now, this is the simple changes I would recommend if you're new to partying. However, there is a more advanced version of this build you can pull off, and it involves re-rolling for NEM3 in the lockout sextant. So basically, if you're planning on re-rolling for NEM3 in the lockout sextant, you can actually look to do a Supreme Ego build on the carry, and then you're just basically multiplying your Hatred, Zealotry, and Wrath. However, if you are going to be taking a Supreme Ego, you're going to have to get March of the Legion because you can only wear one permanent aura. I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you guys really know what you're doing. However, I do think that the best solo or duo trio carry, if you're going for high investment, is to get Supreme Ego, equip March of the Legion, put all of your DPS auras in there, and then get a tiny bit of aura effect on the tree. Just the easy stuff like this 3-pointer here. And that's going to be the most damage you can pump out on the carry. If you're a little less familiar with how party comps work, just go for the simple changes, put on the 3 auras here, spec the aura cluster, shave off a little bit of DPS points on the tree. This build here, obviously you're not going to use a southbound. You can replace this with rare gloves that just give you some ES and some res, some attributes maybe. There isn't a super good glove spot. You can actually even use Azanas if you want explosions. Those are very expensive though. But this character here should be able to just basically do all content in the game if you have maybe like an Aura bot plus one other support. Now, the other thing you need to mention here is what secondary character are you going to play if you're going to be in a 2-man? And I guess there's 2 choices. Obviously, if you're going to play an Aura bot, early, Scion is the better option. And the reason for this is that you can path straight out of the Scion cluster, grab all of the aura stuff, and then you're good to go. The problem with starting Scion is that your top end is going to be a lot worse because you're not going to be getting the aura effect from champion. So if you want to play with your friends in the campaign and the early maps, and you don't necessarily care about the high end where you're juicing Nebulous, you can start as a Scion and play Aura bot as you did before. It's just that the top end is going to be a lot worse because you're not going to be able to get the free aura effect from champion. The other option is if you guys want to league start separately for a little while, you can start as the champion here, and then you're just playing some other build like Shattering Steel, any of the steel skills, you know, or Earth Shatter, any of these builds, and then when you're done with the Atlas, you guys can then respec the champion and then start grouping together as a support. This character getting the 89 overcap should be enough for the Nebulous on the Assassin to pump out as much damage as necessary for literally any content in the game. And because he's running his own DPS auras, you're basically covering all the other bases from the Purities, the Malevolence for the duration. You're getting a ton of accuracy reduction from the Dread Banner, as well as all of the extra taunt stuff on champion. That duo is going to be the strongest, I think, in endgame. The unfortunate reality is that there is no way to play a champion as an aura bot on league start. It's just not something you can really do. You're so far away from any any aura effect, the leveling is going to be so scuffed. So I think the best thing to do would just be to play some duelist build that's just leveling whatever, and then when you guys are closing in on being done with the Atlas, you just respec. I mean, I suppose you could just like grind out as a support champion. It's just going to be super scuffed. I would not recommend doing that. The best third person to add to the party would be a Cursebot, and that's a no-brainer. Cursebot provides a ton of survivability, ton of damage. This is the thing you want to add. Now, there is something to be said about the Mana Guardian as the best third-party person, and that is possible in some cases. However, you do need to do a lot of extra investment on slots number 1 and 2 to fit in as many curses as possible. And just know that you need to cover your bases with curses if you're not going to be slotting in the Cursebot as the third person. Obviously, the Mana Guardian is going to be the fourth person you put in, the huge defensive layer and the increased shock. This is something that's super, 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 super desirable. The Scion would be the fifth person that you slot in, and that's basically just making it so that the assassin doesn't have to run his own auras. You can run all of the offensive auras here, as well as a super juiced determination, haste, grace, and disc. And then last, you'd slot in the Cullbot, obviously. I don't think you should cull with anything less than 5 or 6, in my opinion, unless you guys are simply doing white maps. But you can get away with anything in white maps. But if you want to push 10 Scourge, 5 Delis, some of this like crazy content that's coming out this league, I would not play with a Culler unless you're in a 5 or a 6 man. I just wouldn't recommend it. Fortunately, playing with a Culler is less good these days because of the huge nerfs to delirium quantity and just overall like mob quantity multiplier. The majority of your money in a party is going to be coming from juicing Nem 3, and so just killing the mobs without any quantity or rarity, you're still going to get a substantial amount of currency out of that. So if you're in a 2 and a 3 man, don't fret, because as long as you can assemble a party comp that can do Nem 3, reroll for Beyond Nemesis with misinformation, you guys should be just fine. But yeah, I think that should go over what you guys want to play. So once again, just to summarize it, you're going to start with the Assassin, obviously Spark. That build doesn't change. You slot in the Champion just to get overcap, and then you slot in either the Mana Guardian or the Cursebot. If you can fit in the curses on somebody, you can slot in the Mana Guardian for the extra shock first, and then you can put in the Cursebot if you'd like. So that's your 3 and 4. Your 5th is going to be the Scion Aura bot, so you can split out the DPS auras. Your 6th party member is going to be the Culler. Yeah, I hope that clarifies like kind of how you should start to assemble your party comp if you're playing with less than 6 players. I think the unfortunate reality is now that there is a lot of a bigger gap between 2 and 3 man power and 6 man power. It's just an unfortunate collateral of the nerfs. You can just fit everything in a 6 man, and it's super, super hard to fit it in a 2 and a 3 man. There are options for high investment on 2 and 3 man, so you'll still be able to get most of the same power that a 6 man can. You just got to spend a lot more money than you have before. So yeah, I think that about sums up all the changes here for the party comps. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be trying to answer as many as I can before the league start. We'll be streaming our league start on Friday. We'll go for probably a week. I am flying out the next Friday, so we're probably playing for 8 days, and then we're out of here. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Once again, thanks for watching.